Welcome to the session. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. And I think I'm live right now, so hope everyone is in the session. I hope you all had an awesome morning already with all those sessions and speakers. And I'm gonna share with you something around a topic that is very dear to me since a long time. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys so you can see my presentation. So we're going to explore authentic self-leadership today in this session. And before I tell you about what it actually means for me and why it's so important in this digital time, I would like to first check in with all of you and see if you can just type into the comments your name and what are your current challenges and what's maybe also your interest for the session. So what brought you here today? What are you interested in? And just write it into the comments in 3 words. So not very complicated sentences, just write 3 words. I'm gonna read them out loud. Good morning. Es gibt keine Übersetzung für diese Session. Angelina, there's no translation for this session. So tell me, grow my business, says Samira. Yes, actually you don't have to type your name because I can see it anyways. What else brings you here, or what is maybe also a challenge in right now for you? So Nora, women in tech, exchange, telecommunication, interested in continuing to work best in these challenging times. Keep the team together, says Tanya. Karen says CEO, female leadership. Ronya says challenges, keeping a good routine, feeling alone, having more motivation. Ines says networking is important to grow. Thank you for sharing, getting to know all the digital possibilities software-wise. I choose you because you have an amazing experience and you're a woman. Yeah, I'm a woman, that's clear. Building corporations between us, handle different tasks in the same time. Grow my business in this sector of building. Nadine says trainer, coach, keep personal contact with customers. Thank you all so much for commenting. I always feel like it's a great way of actually understanding who is here in the room and also what you care about, what you all care about. So before we go into content, I would like to start with an exercise together. And that exercise is called A Minute to Arrive. And you just were in a different session and maybe all morning heard a lot of things. And this exercise is the invitation for all of us to land here together in this space and in this different session that we're on right now. So for that, I invite you just to bring your feet to the floor and find a way to sit that is straight and relaxed at the same time. And then you may close your eyes, or if you want to keep them open, just find a spot on the floor to focus your eyes on. And start taking 3 deep breaths. Deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. Deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. One last time, deep breathe. So breathe so much that your belly is really filled with air. And then allow your breath to get his natural rhythm. And allow yourself to fully arrive on your chair. Notice your feet on the floor. And notice the area of your body that touches the chair. And while you take that moment to pause and look inside, check in. What's your inner weather this morning? Is there a lot of sunshine? Are there clouds? Is there maybe a rainbow? And what's important for you right now? What's important for you? And then bring your attention back to your breath. Take one more deep inhale and a slow, long exhale. And when you hear the bell, you open your eyes. Thank you so much. This is actually a really great exercise that I can recommend in so many different ways. If you have a meeting, just taking a moment to arrive in the meeting, there's a study that says that we take different decisions when we take the time to actually stop before we go into the next task. There's also a science around how a meeting starts, defines the first 2 minutes of how we actually start together, makes a difference for the rest and how it ends. So this is an exercise I've been doing with many business people for many years, and many teams have actually put this into their normal day-to-day routine. And you might ask, why is that even the case? Why would people even think of that? And for that, I want to tell you a little bit of my story. So that's me, little Mounira, few years ago. And so for me, my upbringing was, I think, very, very crucial to the work that I'm doing today, even if I didn't know it back then. I grew up in Germany. I was born in Germany. Both of my parents are from Tunisia, actually. My father was one of the guest workers that came from Tunisia when he was really young. He was like 17 years old. And, you know, there were these trucks going through Tunisia, and they were asking who wants to work in Germany. And that's kind of like when he jumped on one of those trucks and he went to Germany to work there. And he worked there his whole life. And for me, as someone who was born in Germany, I had a conflict, an internal conflict the whole time, because I didn't know where I belonged to, really. So my mother said to me, "You're Tunisian, you will always be Tunisian, nothing is ever gonna change that." And I knew that in my heart, but it was really hard to live somewhere else and to be surrounded by such a different culture at the same time. And so no one could spell my name. Mounira was really hard for people to say. And my surname was even harder for people. So I always felt like it's weird. And also people asked me all the time, where are you from? No one assumed that I belong. Everyone assumed I'm from somewhere else. But when I went to Tunisia, I actually experienced something similar, which was that people said, oh, the one from Germany is here. Not like obviously in a loving way, but I was a foreigner there too, because I never lived there. And so out of this, I went into a huge confusion to who am I? Like, what's my actual authentic self? Who am I authentically? I'm twisted between those two very different cultures. And after like some years of crisis, I actually took a decision and I said, okay, if I'm not one of them, maybe I can just choose what I love about both cultures, and that's who I am. Yeah. And that's what I actually did. And funnily, this like choice that I made back then to say, okay, I can choose who I want to be, is actually one of the core of the things that I'm doing right now. Because so I went to school in Germany, I went to university, I studied communication science and sociology. And then I started working in the corporate environment. I worked for BMW, I worked for Red Bull, and I worked for Google. In these corporate environments, I always loved it. I loved the challenges. I loved the big projects I was able to work with. I was a team manager. I was leading different teams around the globe, and I loved it. But what I also noticed is that sometimes it's really hard for me to be part of a culture of a company and still stay true to myself, right? There's this part of me that had this thought, I need to show certain behaviors in order to be successful. But many of those behaviors that I saw in the business environment, which was using power, which was having plans and strategies behind other people's backs and all those things, I didn't feel that was in integrity with who I wanted to be. It wasn't in integrity with my values. And a part of me was like, okay, maybe I have to just be like that to be successful. But the other part was like, what if there's a different way? What if I can be true and authentic to who I want to be in this environment, and at the same time, be successful and have a great career? And the same thing with leadership, now we're in the Women's Forum, was that I wasn't sure how female leadership looked like. And I saw a lot of examples of female leaders becoming really like rigid, and it felt to me that's also not in alignment with how I want to lead people. I want to lead differently. But people would tell me, that you can't be weak when you are a leader. And that was one of the first experiments that I actually did. I experimented with all these questions for more than 20 years now to see how can I be authentic and still be successful? How can I be a good leader and at the same time be vulnerable, show my weaknesses instead of pretending that I'm standing on top of everything? And I think, my upbringing, being of those different cultures, actually gave me a specific resilience skill. And that resilience skill was that I was okay with not belonging and sometimes walking a different path. I just learned that from early on because I had to, I was forced to. But that actually gave me the skill, even in a corporate environment, to always find those areas of influences, how I can bring in those topics and shape a different way of business. So long story short, one of the things that helped me a lot on this quest of how I can stay authentic was actually mindfulness-based practices and mindfulness-based emotional intelligence. I practiced it only for myself, very private, didn't even tell one of my colleagues. And one of the reasons was I was also a bit embarrassed. I didn't think people would take me serious if I tell them that I meditate and do all those things. So I kind of kept it for myself. But over the years, I noticed multiple things. One was I was so much better in my work. I was more effective. I had more fun. I was more inspired. I had better ideas, but also I became a much better leader through that. And because of that, I felt like I need to really share these things. I can't just keep it for myself. The things that I noticed were too valuable for that. So I started sharing it. Back then I was head of PR for 3 countries for YouTube and Google. And so I started sharing it just with some of my colleagues. I told them I'm facilitating a session every day at 2. If you want to join, just come. And at the beginning, there was maybe 1 person coming, maybe 2, maybe 3, sometimes no one. But I just had this commitment. I'm going to do this for 1 year every day. Come what wants to come, I will keep doing it. And after a year, 800 people joined these sessions. And I was blown away. And so was my boss, who was like, why are you even doing this? No one needs this. But when he saw those numbers, he said, wow, you're onto something. And this little, sharing of mine actually became an initiative. And I became part of a global team of people who started conducting mindfulness-based emotional intelligence trainings. And this training until now has reached hundreds of thousands of people around the world within Google, but also really interestingly, it has spread. It's in the meanwhile, this program has been developed at Google, but now it is an independent nonprofit organization called Search Inside Your Self-Leadership Institute. And it's conducting these trainings all over the world. And I've been in Ivory Coast, in Dubai, and in New York, in Russia, and in so many different countries conducting these trainings. And one of the things that blows me the most about that is how universal these topics are and how they are so independent from nationality and who we are and where we belong to. It just helps us to really understand our own core and what's important for us in life. And because these programs have been so successful, actually I got a lot of requests from other companies to share what I did at Google. And I didn't have so much time. Like, I convinced my boss to make this my 20% project next to my other job, still doing PR for 3 countries as a one-woman show. But I noticed it's not enough time, and I had a team to manage. I was an executive. I couldn't do it all at once. So 4 years ago, I decided to quit my job and actually built my own company, and that company is called Connected Business. And that's what I do right now. I support companies to find authentic self-leadership and to learn the skills that we need for authentic self-leadership to navigate the digital time. But also I help them to go from the self, from the individual work to team and different collaboration, building trust in teams and noticing how much the individual is actually important in order to go into teamwork and into this digital transformation we are in right now. So that's my story. That's why I'm here, and I'm so excited to be here. I actually spoke in this forum already when I still was within YouTube, and that's how the connection was done years ago. And now I'm back here. I'm really excited for that. And the question is, are these topics really important? And why do we have to talk about mindfulness-based practices at all, or self-leadership? And one of the things is I think we lived through that in the past months and past year, that change is really unpredictable and it's constantly evolving. Many of us, think, okay, there's a big change right now in our world, but there's this part of us that just wants to go back to normal, right? The state of normal where everything is fine again. But reality shows that that's actually our new normal. The new normal will be that rapid change will be a constant thing. It's not just going to be once in a while, but we're living in a time that demands constant change. And also we see that change and interruptions and happenings are on a global scale, right? The scale of what happens. We all can see what's happening in the world right now. It's the digital working world where we have to all go into this digital transformation. It's AI and automation that shifts fundamentally how we have worked. All of us, we are like now meeting online in a conference that's so different than we used to work in the past. And the world markets are changing. We have natural influences and also catastrophes that we have to see through, and also global crisis like the pandemic that we are all part of. And it makes the scale of the things that are happening makes our world so much more complex. And the other part is that it is becoming so much more complex, but we are still the human being that we used to be before, right? We are not a machine. And that's, I think, the most difficult part for all of us as humans being in the complexity of technology is that our mental demands and complexities are different. It's like we need a different operating system. But also, I think part of us wants to keep up with the the fastness of machines, but we are not. And what it does with people is that there's a lot of overwhelm. There's a lot of, I feel battered, I feel bruised, or also that there's little time to actually step back, regroup, and reflect on the things, and then go from there. And the funny thing about the overwhelm for me is I felt overwhelmed a lot in my work, but I never talked about it because I always felt it's a sign of weakness. So I was like always keeping it for myself. But because it didn't really change, I started talking about it. I started talking about it to my colleagues, but also I started talking about it in my workshops and trainings and sessions. And the interesting thing for me was 90% of the people in the room told me afterwards that they feel exactly the same way. So that's really interesting. They all felt the same way, but no one talked about it. And I think that was one of the things that just struck with me the most. I couldn't understand why people didn't talk about these things openly. So what I noticed is it's overwhelm is not just one thing that one person has, or some people, or the ones who are in burnout. It's actually a sign of our time, because of all those complexities that we live in. And I think COVID has definitely increased that complexity for all of us. So I don't want to talk about problems only. I want to talk about what's happening also in the work world. So many of us heard a lot of those terms like agile work style. So we all need to be agile now and work in an agile way. And the funny thing is, the work and people don't really know what it is. And also one of the things that I experienced, many people say, if you talk about these topics, please don't bring up the word agile. And because I was told this multiple times, I actually started asking, so why are we not talking about agile? What happened? And through my questions, I found out that what happened with this was it became the new it word. And we all know this, everyone who's in business knows, there's always this one thing that everyone wants behind and everyone wants to implement, and agile became one of those. But the problem was that it became this word, but no one really knew how to do it. So kind of like the reality of it was like this, a new logo, it became the new motto, everyone was like, yeah, we have to all do this. But in the way we did it, it was still the same. So one person was in the front presenting it and everyone else was watching. And that's actually not what agile even means, because agile actually means more like this. It's a space where we are all co-creating. And one of the main factors of agile working style means that we let go of control and work, actually work with trust instead, which is a huge factor, but it's getting overwritten so much by the technicalities of it. What I also found out through these conversations is that it has been used as a word to tell people off. When people weren't open for every change or for new transformation, then they said, oh, you're not just being agile enough. So it was used as something to use against people. And to get there where we are in this agile picture, and that we really work with all of our talents and use the talents of each and every person, and also redefine how we lead each other, that's kind of a big step. And one of the first steps for that to even happen is we need this step from self-leadership to co-leadership. We can actually not go into an agile work style. And by the way, I don't only mean that for work. Whatever we're doing, we're a collective world that needs to do a lot of transformation right now. And in order for us to all co-lead these changes we need, the transformation we need, all tackle all those really important topics right now, we need to start with ourselves. And we need to start to lead ourselves and have the capacity to actually be in our biggest strengths and power in order to contribute in a co-creation in a way that is useful, and also in a way that we keep ourselves in check when we're not creating trust but control instead. I hope that's kind of like sticking with you right now, but I will go deeper into self-leadership so you know what I actually mean with that. So what can we do in this kind of time where we have this disruption and this kind of changing way of working? And one of the things I think is very important is in a time when machines are going into their evolution, more than ever before in our history, we as humans need to go into our very own evolution. I have an example for that. It's like the digital times, the unpredictable times that we're going towards to. Let's just assume for a second that in this digital time, everyone needs to speak French, yeah? So the new digital time in 10 years is a French-speaking time, right? So if that's the case, eating a baguette or a croissant every day is not going to make us speak French in 10 years, right? In 10 years, we will have maybe had a lot of pleasantries, but we still don't speak French. Because in order to speak French, we actually need to learn the language. We need to learn the vocabularies. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing a lot working with so many different businesses, is that we need a complexity and skill set. Yeah, so in the face of this complexity and overwhelm, we need a new set of inner strength and a new set of skills that we haven't been learning yet. No one of us learned those at school. No one of us learned that at the workplace, but we need those skills in order for in 10 years to actually use those skills when the world is totally different one. And I think COVID was really like an enhancer. It really like speed up a lot of things, and through that we can actually see, wow, yeah, how do we navigate this? How do we actually do that? And to come back to this self-leadership to co-leadership, let's look into self-leadership and what it means. I will show you 4 keys that are actually part of self-leadership. The first one is self-awareness. So understanding ourselves better, understanding where we come from, what our resources are. And then the second key is our own purpose and what really is deeply meaningful for each and every one of us, because we need that to actually contribute to a higher purpose. And then the compass. Yeah, compass for me is like when the hurricane, is storming outside, how can we come back to a resilience? How can we have the capacity to come back to what's really important without getting drawn away by everything that's happening around us? And the 4th key is embodiment. We can talk about those things forever, but if we can't embody them, they don't mean a thing. Let me walk you through those 4 keys. First key is self-awareness. And self-awareness is a lot of things, but I just like pointing out a few parts of it. It's, first of all, having the capacity to reflect ourselves and understanding our needs, our boundaries, noticing when we have difficult emotions and what they do with us, and also understanding our mental processes, especially those parts of our mental processes that are limiting us or that create a reality that isn't there. Part of understanding our mental process is also understanding that we are not our thoughts. Yeah, that's a huge, big topic I can talk about for an hour, but I won't do that right now. And another thing is emotional intelligence. It's actually an important skill for everything we do right now. Emotional intelligence, and I find it so funny because no one spoke to me ever about emotions in the workplace. Basically, what I was told a lot was emotions don't have a space in the workplace. So you gotta be analytical, you gotta be professional, but no emotions. That's not really what we're talking about in the business. But first of all, no one can just keep their emotions outside of the building. Even if we try, they're somehow always there. And also what I've noticed over the years, emotions are actually really important factors and information givers. So when we use the intelligence of our emotions, we don't have less facts, we actually have more facts. And I want to show you why. One of the things that the World Economic Forum said about the future of work and the skills we will need is that emotional intelligence is actually going to be one of the top skills that we need in 2020. And when you see the picture on the right underneath, yeah, it's a very linear picture of linear work and linear ways of being together. And then the left picture where you see the network and the different structures and the complexity of agility that That's why we need emotional intelligence even more. I personally think we needed it before already, but let's assume now we actually really need it. And what is emotional intelligence? Daniel Goleman, who is an expert in this topic, he pointed out like 4 very important skills of emotional intelligence. He says it's self-awareness, so understanding ourselves. Is self-regulation, means that whatever happens, that we can regulate the emotions accordingly to what's really in a situation, and also go into choosing our reaction rather than letting the outside demand how we're going to react. And then he says it's motivation, so what deeply motivates each and every one of us. He speaks about empathy, and empathy is 2 different things. So empathy is, on the one hand, the ability to put ourselves into other people's shoes. And that's actually one thing that many of us know about empathy. But the other part that's kind of getting missed a lot is trained empathy is also the ability to discern what is my emotion and what is someone else's. I give you an example. Let's say you had the best morning ever, you are chilled out, you had everything you wanted, you are super relaxed. And then you go into an office full of stressed people. And even if you weren't stressed 1 minute before, you'll be stressed in like 5 minutes. So empathy is the capacity in that moment to notice, wait a second, I'm not stressed. My environment is stressed and I'm picking up of those emotions, and that's why I feel stressed too. And then you can actually let go of the emotions that you pick up from others. But that blew my mind when I heard that the first time, because I noticed all of a sudden, wow, I'm actually empathizing with my environment so much that I don't even know what my own emotions are all the time. And the last part is social skills. So notice, like, having the capacity to navigate difficult conversations, having the capacity to work with others, to collaborate, to create something with others, and to be social, and build relationships. The interesting thing that Daniel Goleman found out over the years is that emotional intelligence, other than people thought before, is a trainable skill. And I think that's one of the things that is so mind-blowing. It's a skill that we can learn, like French vocabularies, we can learn that. And it's a skill that is actually something everyone can learn. It's not that some people are better in it or not. Maybe the preset is differently, but we all can learn it. I want to show you a study that is funny, but also shows quite easily why emotional intelligence is so important for us. So imagine that. I'm playing a card game with you. I'm going to give you cards. I'm giving you blue and red cards. And what you don't know is that you can actually only win when you draw on the red cards. Imagine that for a second. So that's an experiment that has been done in Iowa by Latrache et al. And by the way, this experiment is out of the 2-day Search Inside Yourself training. So Latrache et al. Made these experiments, giving those people those cards, seeing how they react, and when they actually find out that they can only win when they know it's the red cards. So what happened in the experiment is, after 50 cards, most of the participants had a hunch. They were like, I think the red cards are the winner cards, but I'm not 100% sure. After 80 cards, most people have figured it out. But interestingly, in this experiment, what they have done is they put people onto a lie detector test, and they measured the reaction in the sweat glands to see when is the first bodily reaction happening. And what they found is, after 10 cards already, the palms started to sweat. But more importantly than that, the behavior started to change. So in other words, 70 cards later, people only figured it out, but already after 10 cards, they had a reaction. And not only that, they actually changed their behavior to draw the red cards before the blue cards. But they didn't know about it. 70 cards later, they only knew about it. And that's incredible. So when we look at emotional intelligence and what it means with regards to this example, is actually, if we very simplified look at the brain right now, what happens when we have an emotion is The red dot is the amygdala, and amygdala is the emotional part of the brain. So what happens is there's a signal to the emotional part of the brain, and that signal sends a signal to the nerve system. So we have a body reaction. It also sends a signal to the prefrontal cortex, which is like the CEO of our brain, the thinking part of the brain, the very analytical part. So it sends that signal after 10 cards, but the CEO of the brain doesn't even bother to look at these signals. It's like, that's not enough data. I'm not even looking at it. After 50 cards, the signal from the emotional part of the brain to the thinking part of the brain gets a bit stronger. So the CEO says, okay, there's information, but it's not enough. And because of those informations and the lack of, the details of it, I'm not going to make a decision. Come back later. Emotional part of the brain is really frustrated right now and says, wait a second, I already know it's the red cards. So after 80 cards, it shoots all the information to the thinking part of the brain. And finally the CEO says, the red cards are the winner cards. So that's kind of like what happened in the card game. And increasing the capacity of emotional intelligence actually means that we increase the Wi-Fi connection between the emotional part of the brain and the thinking part of the brain. So it's not just emotions all over the place. It actually means that the thinking part of the brain speaks much earlier to the emotional part of the brain. So we understand all those things that actually change our behavior already. Because sometimes we run around with an emotion for weeks or months and we don't even know about it. And then maybe we have a moment when it just bursts out and we're like, oof, I didn't know it. That emotion was so strong. So chances are it's because it was bubbled up for a long time, changed your behavior for a long time. You just didn't know about it. And when I saw this the first time, it just blew my mind. And I was so, blown away by the fact we need to know that. We need to practice that and create the bandwidth so those two parts of the brain speak faster, because if it already changes my behavior, I really want to know about that. And we all should. So let's go to the next key, which is purpose. And purpose for me is really, let's say it like that. If we are all in situations in our life where a ton of things are happening, and the purpose is somehow the red line. And the number one factor that helps us to be resilient in a time when it's crazy is actually to come back to that red line and have those principles for our life that never change. And you could say it's like a little bit like a house. And I love the picture that Stephen Covey is painting about purpose. He says, okay, so it's like you have a ladder and you climb up that ladder, and that ladder and that house is your life. And at the end of the day, you end up on the rooftop of this house, just to look at the house next to it and notice that that would have actually been your house, your life that you wanted to live. So the question is, where are you climbing up? What's your house? And are you climbing up the right house? Which is that your house that you actually want to look back at the end of your life and say, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to. And when you see in this picture, it's just like understanding who we deeply are, what our deepest values are, what's deeply meaningful for us in life, what we want to contribute into this life, what we want to also support people with, or whatever we want to create in this world. That's what keeps us sane in crazy times, in unpredictable times, in times when we don't know what's happening. If we have that, it's like a guiding flock. Nothing can, just like shake us so much if we have that red line and that anchor, that inner compass that keeps us centered to what's truly important for us, and to the principles and values that we want to live, to the kind of person we want to be. And there's there's different ways to look at that. So first of all, the question, what's my personal deepest contribution that I want to make? But it also has to do with strength. And I'm not talking about strengths that we put into a CV. I'm talking about real superpowers So those strengths that some of us would even call weaknesses, yeah, because we think they are actually weaknesses, but actually when we look deeper, they are actually our superpowers and something that makes us really unique and our unique contribution. It's our values, it's our passion and our deepest why, so why we're doing the things that we do, and it's our vision in life. So all those are compiled together, the purpose. I would love to go deeper into this topic, but we don't have so much time for that. Next topic and next key of self-leadership, authentic self-leadership, is actually our compass. And that's, we all know that situation. It's like things are happening, uncontrollable things. We are in lockdown, which is a good example right now, but it's also, it's just like we had all these plans and all of a sudden everything gets shaped and we have to start all over again. And I want to just make a quick excursus into how we humans work, because it helps us to see why we're actually reacting so strongly in certain situations. So when you see at the left, if any one of us has fears, stress, feels any pressure, or is in change or times of unknown, that's actually something we don't like as humans. It's a very, very deeply rooted reptilian brain reaction that we have when these kind of things happen in our life, which is we go to protection mechanism and into our very own autopilot behavior. And in autopilot behavior and protection mechanism, we actually either run away or we fight or we freeze, or we do an automated thing, but it's not coming out of a choice. But if we practice and train and understand our conditioning and our triggers and how we actually react, so if we really learn the skills of self-leadership, what we can do instead in these situations when there's fear, stress, pressure, change, or unknown, we can understand our boundaries, our needs, our emotions, and mental health. And that can actually bring us to a different reaction. And that reaction leads to self-empowerment. So instead of being, drawn away or being stopped by the conditioning or by the circumstances, we go into self-empowerment and remind ourselves again that whatever happens in any kind of situation, there's always freedom of choice. And that's really when we look into the brain again, and that just quickly is, no matter if there is a real threat in the world or a perceived threat, we all have that reaction, which is fear, anxiety, arousal. And our thinking part of the brain is the regulator. It can help us regulate the emotion and help us understand, wow, this is not, it's not about survival, this situation. Or, hey, I can still stay calm, although there's a lot going on. And that's why it's so important to have those skills so we can create that resilience in this time. And that we can constantly go back into the freedom of choice and see how many doors we actually have open to choose from. And the last key that I want to talk about is embodiment, because many people talk about mental mindset shift. And although I know it's a factor, I would always say if it's only a mindset shift, it doesn't do anything. If we don't deeply embody what it means to be in this ever-changing world, and if we don't have the capacities and skills, it's just a thought. So how can we do that? And one of the answers is, of course, that I bring you today is mindfulness. And many people have a lot of pictures around mindfulness, and one is that we're all sitting cross-legged and we're chanting Om or whatever. And although the practices of mindfulness have been rooted in some of those traditions, it goes a long way in so many traditions. And I have been, when I did the courses in Dubai, where there's a lot of Muslim people, they all said, yeah, that's actually what we do when we pray. And they actually started doing, the minute to arrive before the prayer. And they said, wow, it shifts the whole way how our prayer works. So it's kind of universal that when we look back in time, that people understood that we have to cultivate our mind. And actually, even the Tibetan translation of mindfulness or meditation is actually cultivating and understanding the mind. So in a nutshell, what does mindfulness mean? It's actually going out of autopilot and being present with what is. And through being present, we actually go into choosing how we want to react in a certain situation. If you see this picture, it's kind of like a picture of how this all looks like. So it's like you have all this, you know, the Matrix situation. Neo stands there and all these bullets come across him. And he's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But in that moment, he reminds himself, wait a second, I'm in the Matrix. And then he takes this one bullet and then all the others fall down. And that's kind of like, for me, a really strong picture that shows the essence of mindfulness, which is no matter what happens, to being able to make this step back in our head and noticing that although something is happening, there's always a real big space where we can inform our decision and decide how we want to react to. That's, you know, the essence of mindfulness. And in a way, it's a mental training. And the really cool thing is, in the last years, the neuroscience, especially neuroplasticity, has caught up on that and has looked into the brains of thousands of people and actually noticed that we all can change the structure and the function of our brain. So basically, when I started teaching these things in front of engineers in Silicon Valley, I would just say, you can change your own software. And that's, I think, one of the interesting things, that not only these practices are useful, but the science shows that we can actively train those neural pathways in our brain that have to do with those skills. And if we keep repeating that in the end, we develop those skills and that we can really choose it. So I said already, that's the self-leadership is a real crucial part in order to go into co-leadership, because what co-leadership is based on is an empowered, authentic human being on the one side. So in order to have a group of people, of empowered, authentic people who can lead themselves and take responsibility for their own experience in life. Not blame someone else for it, but really be in charge of that, but also know their own purpose and ask the question, how can my personal purpose contribute to the purpose of the team, of the organization, of this world? So it's a real big shift from I to we, but the I is the first step and it needs to happen first. Otherwise, we can work in groups and teams a lot, but it will not have the same effect. At least that's the experience that we have done working with different groups and companies for years and years. So when we do the work, we actually always start with individuals. So we show them the skill sets, we teach those skills. And then after a while, when they really embody those skills, we start with the group process and with the co-creation and the collaboration and co-leadership. Because that's very clear too, leadership has changed. Leadership is not anymore one role. That doesn't mean that the leader is obsolete. The leader is still a very important person, but the role of the leader changed fundamentally. And leadership in its essence becomes inspiring others to follow. And anyone can do that, no matter which role, no matter which job, title, doesn't matter, everyone can lead others. So to summarize authentic self-leadership, the first key is self-awareness. So understanding ourselves better, emotional intelligence is part of that. Understanding our purpose, our red line, having a compass, so the resilience to really stay focused to what's important for us and the person we want to be, no matter what circumstances, and the embodiment. So not only to know it in our mind, but to fully embody the skill sets that we need for that. And that leads us to a freedom of choice. And on the right hand, you see this really beautiful picture of a samurai. I really like the samurai picture because they have a sword. I don't know if you know that, but they have a sword that can cut a hair into two parts. But it's at the same time soft. So it's that's what we need. We need, like many people assume, mindfulness and self-leadership and all those things are only soft, but it's actually both. It needs a lot of courage to go that path. It needs a lot of trust. Yeah, we need to trust our path, even if the outside world doesn't always understand what we're doing or where we're walking. It needs authenticity to really show ourselves the way we are, show ourselves vulnerable as well. It needs a lot of curiosity instead of judging, a lot of curiosity as an inner way of looking at things, compassion towards ourselves and others, and acceptance, again, towards ourselves and others. Because if we develop that towards ourselves, we actually develop that towards everyone else around us. And that's really powerful. And yeah, last but not least, we're going into this paradigm shift. And many things will change through the digital times, through those complex times we're in, through all those global changes. And one of the things is, that's a study that Google has done, is that they noticed, they looked into all teams globally, and they looked into what's the one factor, what makes our teams really successful. And the number one factor they found out was psychological safety. The teams that were best, sales teams and engineering teams globally within Google, were the ones who had the highest psychological safety. And one last thought that I wanna show you, because that's really showing this paradigm shift, is Mo Gadavat. He's used to be a colleague of mine, and he used to be the vice president of Google X, and he worked with artificial intelligence. And one thing that he said is, so machine learning is like, the machine is first like a little child, which means it can, you know, it needs to learn how to walk, it needs to be fed with information. So that's what we humans do first. But after a certain time, the machine becomes a self-learning system, and which means it will take the information from the whole world and create its own reality. And what he also said is what really struck with me. He said, if a machine would look at our world and how it is right now, it would think that we value power and money over humans. And that's the kind of world it would create. So if we want to create a different world, it needs actually every individual of us to live the values that we actually want to have in this world. So once the machines start learning themselves, they see what we actually want in this world. And so I think the biggest trend of the digital transformation is that we all go back to what actually made us human in the first place, understanding what it means to deeply be in human connection, use the skills that no machine can ever learn, that only humans can bring into this world, and to find sustainable solutions for everyone. And so my invitation to all of you is, let us rethink the way we do business, or we do everything in this world, and help each other thrive, and maybe even create a movement. Yeah, and that movement might lead to all of us doing the things that are important for the next 7 generations to come. Thank you all so much. I will just, for the ones who are German in this room, I wrote a book, and it was published by Ariston Random House Publishing this year. And it's all about what I just told you about authentic self-leadership. So if you want to read more or dive deeper into the topic, feel free to read that. The English version is in the making. And yeah, I would like to just have like your takeaways. Maybe you can just take them into the comments. So one takeaway and your inner weather, and just type 2 words into the chat. And after that, I would like to use the rest of the time for questions of yours. So let me know one takeaway or your inner weather. Hope and sunrise. That's a change from within. Thank you. I really hope it was helpful and useful. Machines reproduce what we put in them. You embody the authenticity. The machine will take our behavior. From self to co, sunny with snow glittering. Oh, I like that. I came from sunrise to sunshine and wished inspiration, which I got. Thank you so much for this presentation. Alter Wein in neuen Schläuchen. Oh, I don't know how to translate that right now. Thank you. Yeah, definitely old wine, for sure. Confirmation content is a summary of my intuition. Shifting, changing. Dedication matters. Thank you, mind changes and being humans is key to success. Sunshine over the rain. Oh, so much sunshine here right now. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I love it. Trust your feelings. Sunrise. Like a lot your PowerPoint. Very good. Thank you. I'm putting a lot of time in it because I love visual things. Thanks a lot. Eye-opening and inspirational. Thank you all so much. It's awesome to read your comments, and I'm very thankful. And if you want to reconnect afterwards, here you can see my web address. And now, is there anyone who has a question around the topic or anything you want to get answered? Is there anything? Yeah, how can you be in contact? Just go to my website and you can just contact us through that. That's the easiest one. So on the slide now, connected-b.com. It's the easiest. Anyone else got a question? Do you still do the lunch routine? I mean, I'm not working for Google anymore, so I don't do that routine anymore. But funnily enough, as I'm gone for more than 5 years from this office, and it's still ongoing. So the group has grown tremendously. I'm really proud of it, and it still is ongoing, and people still do it. And not only in the office where I was, but it's actually a global movement. And obviously for me personally, I do it. I mean, I practice these things every day. It became the way. I think, one of the most important things was the question, who do I want to be as a person? How do I want to show up in this life? And one of the things that is crucial for me, I want to be of service for the growth of people really deeply. That's my aspiration. And in order to be in the service in the best way, I need to do my part in this. And that's why these practices are so important for me, because they're not just practices as part of my to-do list. They are the thing that helps me to be in service of the next generations to come. How to join the movement? There's different ways of doing it. So first of all, being part of bringing this to your company. We also train teachers who bring this then to their own companies. We also try to gather a global online community that can connect about these topics. So if you're interested in any of that, let me know. Any recommendation how to integrate regular meditation into daily life? Yes, I would say do it right away, first thing in the morning, without even thinking. That's the most effective way of how I could implement it into my daily life. But if you don't have time in the morning, just find a specific time. And rather than doing a long practice, just do it every day. Like 1 minute every day is enough. If you do it every day, it becomes your routine. And then some part of it becomes easier to do it even longer. So many people put a lot of pressure into, I need to do it an hour, and then they do it once a week. So regularity is more important than doing it long time. And my recommendation is use an app or something at the beginning which helps you to do those practices easier, or a recording. I can highly recommend the Insight Timer app. I really like that app. Thank you, Nora, for sharing that. Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of people doing these kind of works already. Like, I'm not showing you something new. I think the things that I've been doing that are maybe a bit different was that I combined it with mindfulness-based practice, because that's how I learned is the most effective. But the principles have been out there for ages. I'm not telling you anything new. Yeah, I think that's it, right? There's no more question, and we're also at the end of the time, so I think it's probably a good way to end. And before we end it all together, I'm just like inviting you one more time to take a deep breath together. You can close your eyes and just take one deep breath, very deep and very slow out. Thank you all so much. I wish I could have all seen you in person. I wish you all the best, and I hope if you have a question or anything, please feel free to contact me afterwards. And wishing all the best for all of you and your loved ones. And thanks for being here with me.